May have cracked the code, and hopefully this is live on my Facebook account and in YouTube. So we'll see. Had our resident expert Tommy Andreen uh, help with some of the logistics on the tech side of things. So hopefully this is streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. I don't know what channel or what, but anyways, hopefully it's live, and if not, we'll monkey with it later and keep tweaking it. The message this morning is from Luke 12:22 to 34. I'll read those verses, and then we'll jump right into it. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? Do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Especially that last word, one of the last words that we heard there. What comes to mind when you picture it? Treasure. My default is a treasure chest, and of course somewhere close behind, pictures of pirates. I suppose the two are inseparable, but when I hear the word treasure, that's the image that comes to mind for me. Maybe you think of a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, and instead of pirates, then of course you quickly think of leprechauns. Or if you were lucky enough to have grown up in that era of Scrooge McDuck, maybe when you think of treasure, you have this vivid imagery of Scrooge McDuck swimming through a pool of money in his big bank vault. I suppose those are pretty common pictures when we think of treasure. But in the words that you just heard me read from Luke 12 this morning, I don't know if that imagery, if those pictures are as helpful to our understanding of what Jesus is teaching this morning. Because when Jesus uses the word treasure, it is by no means confined to or limited to money or coins. In fact, Jesus helps us kind of understand what it means, or what he means at least, when we talk about treasure. You can connect the dots by paying attention to the word treasure in the words that Jesus uses to teach, but also the two times that the word heart is mentioned in this section. And if we connect those dots, it gives us a pretty clear picture of what Jesus means when he's talking about treasuring something. The first verse is probably the most well-known in this section, one of them. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. But it's the other section maybe that we can gloss over or skip right over in this section, which really gets to the heart of what treasuring is. He said earlier in verse 29, "And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it." So where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And then he explains, especially in this context of food and drink, he's talking about where your heart is set. So maybe we can replace that word setting your heart with treasuring. Essentially, Jesus is saying, don't treasure what you eat or drink. Don't worry about that. So we treasure where we put our heart, where we set our heart on things. Those things that take our focus, our time, our energy, that's what we treasure. Another way to think about a treasure is to ask yourself the question, what is it that I value and attach worth to? What are my priorities? When you drill down and you wrestle with those questions, what are the things that you value or have great worth to you? What is your greatest priority? Then you're going to find where X marks the spot on your treasure map, so to speak. Jesus gave two examples, and I already mentioned them as we read through this section. Food and clothing, he says, Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes." And in these examples, Jesus gives us another indicator, another way that we can help understand what we treasure in this life, and that is worry. We might be more used to this section in Jesus' teaching dealing specifically with this topic of worry and the encouragement that Jesus gives to say, look at nature, it's all taken care of, God provides for everything, and they don't worry about it at all. Why would you worry about it? You are more valuable to me than they are. Don't worry. And that is certainly one of the main thrusts of this teaching of Jesus, to address our worry. But if we pull back the curtains on worry just a little bit more, we start to see that there's a correlation between worry and treasure. A few examples. What is it that you worry about? When is the last time that you stayed up all night worrying how good a job your neighbor's landscaper was going to do? And the last time that you were at a restaurant and you saw somebody that was newly trained as a server and you could tell they were struggling, when is the last time that you worried about how that individual was doing? When is the last time that you were beside yourself, wondering what time all of the options, the items, the grocery things that are necessities for your life, what time those were going to be delivered at the local grocery store? When have you worried recently about whether people you know have problems with ants in their house and how they're handling them? Are all of these things unimportant? No, they're absolutely important to some people, just not you. That's because you don't attach any value or worth. Those things that I just mentioned are important to some people, but they are not priorities for you. But you do worry about your kids. You do worry about your health. You worry about your financial situation. You worry about work. Why do you worry about these things and not those others? Because you attach value, you attach worth. These things are priorities in your life. And so that helps us understand the things that we worry about, those are the things that are going to help us again understand where X marks the spot on our personal treasure map. The things that we value, the things that are for us priorities. But worry does more than just reveal what we treasure. In fact, Jesus had some pretty harsh, condemning words when he described those who worry. He says of you and me, when we let worry get the better of us, that we are of little faith. Worry isn't just a normal part of life. It isn't this harmless fixation on worst case scenarios that really isn't going to matter to us or affect us one way or the other. It's actually a reflection that when we worry, we are more like the unbeliever than we are reflecting the child of God. Which is quite remarkable when you think of even this gift of faith itself. It is a gift, isn't it? This is God's gift to us, something totally, completely undeserved. And yet when he gifts us with this faith, for us to then fail to trust in the one who gave us this gift to provide and take care of all of the things that we spend our time worrying about, I mean, is there a bigger way that we could slap God in the face? And not just that, but if we worry all the time, if we worry ceaselessly, Jesus teaches elsewhere that can potentially choke out our faith. If you think of the parable of the sower and the seed, one of those sections of seed got choked out by what? Life's worries. A scolding and a slap on the wrist of worry are not going to solve this problem. We need something more. So here's something that you never need to worry about: how much God treasures you. There is never a doubt, there is never a question, there is never any uncertainty. Now, in these verses where Jesus is teaching in this section, he didn't necessarily make some big splashy statement about how much he treasures us, but it's clear because it's woven throughout this whole teaching. Jesus just includes it in his teaching as he's talking about looking at the birds of the air that are unconcerned, and yet God feeds them. What does he say about the birds in relation to us? He says, how much more valuable you are than birds. And notice that God wasn't reluctant or hesitant to call us into his kingdom, but then when he did, look how he speaks to us as our good shepherd. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. He wasn't reluctant. He didn't second guess himself. Finally, look at Jesus' own words, the ones that are some of the most familiar in this section, where he says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. If one's heart is with those things or people he or she treasures, what do we conclude about a gracious God who quite literally clothed himself with flesh to be in the midst of you and me, to be among mankind, because his heart was literally right next to those he treasured? Jesus' incarnation, that miracle that God should come and dwell among us, that he should live with us, let that be an indicator. Let there be no question that if God did this for us, truly he treasures us. He came to be among us so that his heart could be with those he treasured, you, me, and all people. What on earth could ever provide you with that measure of worth that God attaches to you? That sense of value, of how appreciated, how special, how dear you are to God. And if that is the case, then compare that devotion, dedication, compare God, how much he treasures us, to anything else in this world that we could ever treasure. What else is worth treasuring as much as the one who treasures us so much? And there's something else that is an added benefit of that. When we treasure the things that Jesus calls us to, then we don't have to worry. And Jesus provides us direction. He redirects what we would place our heart or set our heart on, those things that we would treasure. He says in verse 31, to seek his kingdom. You might be more familiar with Jesus' Sermon on the Mount recorded in Matthew chapter 6, where he says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. What is Jesus telling us to do? Treasure his kingdom. Attach your value, your worth to that. And as I mentioned, you will never have anything to worry about, because that will never let you down. So long as you attach your heart, you set your heart, you treasure the things of this world, there will always be worry that accompanies them. You will always worry if you have enough. You will always worry if you're going to run out. You will always be worried when your heart is attached to the things of this world. But when you seek first his kingdom, you never have any reason to worry, because the gospel is always at work, just as it is in you and me. So treasure his kingdom. Seek first that kingdom, just as a missionary named Eli Stanley Jones did. Most well known for his mission work in India, later in life, at the age of 88, E. Stanley Jones suffered a stroke that left him considerably impaired. And yet, even though he was limited in terms of his speech, his hearing, even his physical movement and abilities, he was able to dictate his last final book into a tape recorder. And in that book, he used a very powerful illustration to help us understand the value of treasuring Christ above all else. He likened his situation to that of a mountain climbing rope. Now, if you're not familiar with mountain climbing, it's a very thick rope. And at the very center of that rope is the strongest fiber, the strongest cord wrapped together. So that even if the outer layers of that rope are frayed and rub against the rock as the mountain climber swings and sways, that center of that cord is never going to break. It's extra sturdy. And so even after his stroke, E. Stanley Jones said, with Christ at the center, his greatest treasure, with Christ in his heart, there was never any concern, never any worry, because he knew that Jesus had him. He said, many of the strands of my life have been broken by this stroke, for I can no longer preach, and I cannot write, as my eyesight is so poor that I cannot see my own writing. I can only dictate it into a tape recorder. The things that were dear to me for the time being are broken. The innermost strands belonging to the kingdom of the person of Jesus, and my experience of him holds me as much as the total rope, for the inmost strands are the strongest. I need no outer props to hold up my faith, for my faith holds me. Come to think of it, maybe that should be the image that comes to mind when we think of treasure, as Jesus teaches it. A mountain climbing rope, where as long as Jesus is at the center, we never have any need to be afraid of him letting us go. And that doesn't just apply to world-renowned evangelists. It applies to all of us who seek first Christ's kingdom and his righteousness. To all who recognize that where I place my heart, that's where my treasure is. So let us then treasure our Savior Jesus. And not only never have to worry, but know that he will never let us down. What greater treasure is there than Christ and his kingdom? Blessings as you prioritize Jesus' treasure, his kingdom, his gospel work in your life and through your life to others. And he will never let you down, and you will find you never have any reason to worry. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next Sunday, if not before.